Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Vivian. I'm the industry corner coordinator for Asian animation, and we will be hosting Wayne Say. Wayne will be talking about his journey into animation. If you have any questions, feel free to either hold them until the end. We'll do the Q&A portion towards the end, or if you don't think you can hold them for that long, like you're gonna forget or something, you can feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll keep track of any questions. Um, I'll like hold on to your questions and ask Wayne towards the end. But yeah, the event will be recorded. It will be posted to the AAA YouTube in a couple of weeks or so. I'll make an announcement about it when it's up. But otherwise, Wayne, take the stage.
Cool. Thank you for having me, Vivian, and welcome everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Wayne Say, and I am currently a visual development artist working at DreamWorks Animation. Um, and I've been there for almost 7 years now, and that's basically my entire professional career. So it's honestly not that long. I still feel like a newbie a lot of times. And, it's funny that I'm talking about my journey kind of into there, into animation, but really like today, um, you know, the whole idea about journey is kind of talking about my artistic journey and how that can vary super different between everyone. And I think everyone and every individual, that's the cool thing about art and artists and creatives is that we all have this journey of, life and our artistic career that we kind of go through. And You know, I think mine is incredibly just boring, but it has brought me to where I am today. So, hopefully you guys will get something out of it. I'll show you some pretty embarrassing stuff that I've never shown anyone before, mostly really old work of mine when I was a student that I tried to hide forever, but I do feel like it's relevant talking about my journey because I think every artist comes from somewhere, and it's really cool to see artists evolve and grow. I think I was kind of inspired by I went to this museum show about it was a retrospective on Maurice Sendak, who is most famous known as the children's book illustrator and author for Where the Wild Things Are. But there was so much more to his life as a person and when he was like a student studying art and his early artwork and how he evolved. And till him, breaking through in his professional career, to him making, what we deem his masterpiece, and then, to the end of his career. And there's something really cool walking through that space chronologically, like documented. And not that my life is worth documenting at this point, maybe one day, but that's kind of how I want to talk about this journey idea. And it's always interesting, I think, to pick artists' brain and to kind of see where they're coming from. It's, vulnerable in a way. And it's a lot of times very personal. To me, I think artists and their work sort of kind of have to like go together in a way, not always commercially. And sometimes we work on projects, commercially that we just do for work. But I think a lot of personal work and a lot of, even then, you'll always have a little bit of like your individuality come through. And to me, I think the cool thing about having these artist talks is you get to see a lot of different perspectives. And so, mine is just one perspective of one journey going through art, and I got to where I am, as a biz dev artist in animation. So people are interested in that, then um, it's one way to get there. But I do feel like the goal is that everyone will search for their own journey and to find whatever they're looking for and get them to where they want. Or, you'll probably never get to where you want because that's like the truth with artists and creatives. We're always making stuff and we'll never stop. I hope, like Miyazaki, who will probably never stop, I hope. And his journey, we think, you know, is a lifetime mastery, but it's still going and he's still ongoing on his journey. And so am I, and so are all of you. So Yeah. All right. So I actually went home like not that long ago, and I found pieces of art and paintings that I did from when I was a childhood. When I was, I took my first art class when I was in seventh grade, and this is the stuff that like no one has ever seen before. So it's kind of fun to look back upon it now that I'm like a professional artist because I forgot about all of this. So I took like an art class in a friend's, it was like a classmate's parents' garage, and her like mom was my first art teacher in a way. It was like a summer. And the funny thing is, if a lot of you don't know my work or have seen my work on like Instagram, um, I paint a lot of the same stuff. And that kind of surprised me. It was telling me that I had this certain interest in like fruit or like animals or architecture, which I'll talk about more because I come from an architecture background, or I went to school for that, so I'll get into that a little bit. But seeing this stuff just like brought me back, and I was like, wow, when I was in seventh grade, I think this was seventh grade. It was 2002. It says on this July 2002. Um, yeah, but it's crazy and kind of cool to see like my old work, and I still kind of draw like in this vein in a little bit, and then that's without me ever thinking about this at all. It just sort of happened. So anyways, that's just a little intro to my baby work. But the whole point is, everything you do in life is kind of a journey, and it's part of your journey, and everything you study and every experience you have can kind of coalesce into, this journey of art, because as creatives, we kind of pull in everything we do and we output it in sort of an artistic way. Um, So I basically didn't do that much art as a kid. This was like my only art class. I never did art in high school, really. We didn't really have like AP art classes or anything. So that was just that. And maybe I was pretty good for a seventh grader. I don't know. I like to think so. But yeah, and then I went to architecture school. I went to UC Berkeley for architecture school, and I graduated and got a degree. And part of the reason I went there was my dad was also an architect. So I kind of just got, and to me, architecture is also a creative journey and a creative, designer. And so there are overlaps in, the way I think about design. A lot of it probably is subconsciously influenced by, how I studied architecture in school and how I conceptually think about things. So to me, like, I'm lucky that it's kind of potentially related. I sometimes don't think so because I'm like, you don't draw. It's like you don't draw, right? Like they didn't teach me anything about drawing or anything, but it becomes like a part of, who you are. And to this day, like I'm still very interested in architecture. I left obviously to, I changed careers into animation later on, and I'll talk about that. But I still very much architecture is still a big part, and landscapes a big part of my work. And I think just like me being a child, you know, growing up with my dad, who's an architect, had a lot of influence on me, whether I knew it or not. This is my first oil painting, by the way. I remember I was really proud of it because oil painting is like crazy, and I had to use like turpentine when I was like a kid, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But yeah, I still have this at home, which is cool. Um, so yeah, first oil painting. I think this was my first acrylic painting, and then my first tiger. So cool. So I graduated architecture, and I moved back home to work for my dad. So I have an architecture degree, and I ended up doing that for about 5 or 6 years before I jumped into animation. But while I was doing that, there was a part of me that wanted to explore architecture in a more like conceptual, imaginative way. I think one of the problems I had with architecture was it's super cool and super fun when you get to do like amazing projects and you know, the first like 10%. And then the rest of it is getting that building actually made. And that is a long, long, grueling process. It takes a lot of money, like there's real concerns, real life impact. And most of it was, still design and problem solving, but it was problem solving in a way where you're like figuring out like square footage and like, a lot of building code and like making sure you like a lot of annoying, let's just say like real life, very applicable things, engineering and like how like air conditioners, have to be put in where the switches are for like outlets, like everything. It's still very, very cool design, but it wasn't that imaginative kind of conceptual art that I kind of was interested because I grew up loving film and movies, and there was a part of me while I was in college, I was like, I want to make work on movies. So I kind of pivoted a little bit, but while I was working in architecture, I started taking art classes because at that time, I think concept art was starting to become a thing. I'm pretty old. So it was kind of like the early days of digital painting, and concept art was starting to grow a little bit. A lot of people did not, like in college, I did not know that was a profession. And I did not know animation and like visual development is a profession, um, which I think is totally different now because it's digital art and has grown so much through like the internet and social media. And it is a really, really, really cool job. So I took classes at Concept Design Academy in Pasadena because that was like the only thing around that wasn't, full on art school at the time. And one of the reasons I moved back to LA was to kind of pursue art because I knew like Art Center was here and they had some classes and, CDA. So here's just some random work I did from classes. You know, this is like my student work when I had no idea what I was doing. I had no foundation. I took classes way out of order and everything, like no curriculum. I just did what I thought was interesting. And I just wanted to like I was, for this, I just remembered I wanted to make sci-fi architecture because I thought that was cool in college. So after I graduated, I'm like, I'm gonna go make cool sci-fi architecture. Screw real architecture. Like, let's make some, I don't know, spiky shit. And yeah, so I'll share a little bit of work from that. This was from the same class. Um, and looking back, it's like very early primitive work of mine, but there's still a part of me that's like, okay, my design logic and design philosophies and kind of shape language is still like kind of similar. Um, my aesthetic and my art abilities have totally changed and evolved, but there's still something kind of cool and like definitely innocent about this. But, you know, that was kind of what architecture kind of pivoted me into as a designer. So I was like, okay, this is kind of my realm. And then I took a couple more classes. I took like a class every, term. It was a very not full-time thing. I was not a full-time student because I was working for my dad. But I mainly just did this for fun. And there was a part of me that was like, if I really do get good at this, this would be cool to actually work on movies. So this is just from another project that I made when I was a student. I really, really wanted a sugar glider for a little while when I was in like school and college until I realized they're illegal in California, so I can't get one. But yeah, I just made a project about this sugar glider that goes through his world and he eats food and he runs away from cats and you know hangs out inside a hollow tree. Like it's really innocent and fun looking back at it. I hate these paintings. My color is like horrible, but it's kind of cool to see like all this kind of innocent and kind of creative. I don't want to say like the super creative because it's really not. It's like a animal in a space, like we do way more creative stuff for work nowadays. But just pushing forward some like ideas from just like our imaginations or whatever we love. Because at this point there was no rules. I was a student. No one was telling me what to do. I could I could have made a project on anything. And the fact that I chose to make a project about a little flying squirrel, or, do like projects about sci-fi buildings, you know, says a little bit about myself. Um, so just some more work. This was just another project about an underground facility, sci-fi. I was really interested in sci-fi at the time. Um, yeah, not great work, but just random designs that I did. Landscapes. Um, this actually looks kind of cool now looking back. I was getting a little better. I think I kind of ordered these in chronological order, I hope. So, getting a little better, not super interesting, but I kept going. Oh, this is part of the sugar glider location that I made. There's a little tree. And then I kept going with the sugar glider thing. I think I worked on it over the course of like 2 classes. I just kept, this was just like my idea in my head. I was obsessed with it. I was like, I'm gonna keep pushing this little story about these little animals. And then it got, I think this was a further class. And so I was like, oh, I'll change the style a little bit, make it more interesting as I was learning more and, seeing more art and creating my visual library. I started expanding on the world and it became like more industrial. And then I added another sugar glider because I wanted to make it a romance for some reason. So this was part of that whole thing. And then I threw some sci-fi elements on it because again, no one was telling me what to do, so I could do whatever I want. So I was like, yeah, screw the forest. Let's say they go to the sci-fi world with graffiti and whatever. And then this was just another painting. So these are like just like really early works. I'll go through these a little faster. Yeah, I was like, oh, let's make it colorful and romantic. And then finally, this was, I don't know, one of my favorite movies when I was a kid that I watched a million times was Lion King. So this was just me ripping it off. This is the Mufasa, like, I'm like, they talk to you and the clouds. It doesn't have to make sense when it's just your own project. Who cares? But really, I'm showing you all this because it's just about having fun, I think, especially when you're in school. And part of this whole reason of me telling you about like my journey and what I did in school and what I want you to take away from this is really ask yourself like what you love, what you grew up with, like what truly inspires you, because that stuff is probably the direction you're going to want to go and where you end up going just accidentally. You're gonna search, your journey will go towards what you truly love. Um, in my opinion, don't be like, oh, the studio is doing this thing, it's cool, I'm just gonna do that, and then like that's my way to get a job. I think your art career is so much more than that, and you'll end up where you are if you just search for your interests. And I guess for mine, it's architecture and animals. And I still agree with it. That's what I love, except I also paint like food and dogs and stuff now. So my next big breakthrough in art, because I kind of actually got bored of the concept art thing for a little bit, and I was actually on my way to becoming like an architect, and I was gonna get licensed and take a test, and I really didn't want to do that. Um, but I was kind of on my way and I kind of dropped taking those like concept design academy classes and just having fun, which I really wish I didn't because looking back, they're pretty like it's pretty cool for like just 10 weeks of work. I didn't know what I was doing. But one of the big changing points in my artistic career was I took a landscape painting class and I discovered plein air because that's something I've never done before. And to me, that was the coolest thing ever because that really is up my alley in a way. And as an architect, you architects use sketchbooks too, but we use it in a different way. And a lot of it is like urban sketching or you just draw in pen. And then, so I was kind of going out and drawing anyways. But when I started painting, I was like, oh man, this is way cooler than drawing. Like I can paint the whole thing, there's colors, and it's so much more impressive than like a little ink sketch you do on a napkin. So I kind of fell in love with that, to be honest. And this was from my first class. I like had a French easel They made us buy Frenzies. Oh, this was an oil paintings up at Griffith Observatory. And I was like, you can go to cool places and just paint. That's awesome. That's like the coolest hobby ever. So I kind of just started doing that and I stopped doing like digital work. Um, so everything you saw was like before, I started plein air painting or traditional painting. And then after I took the first landscape painting class, I just kept doing that. And stopped thinking about like trying to make, concept art and getting a job. I just wanted to paint. This was this was at Pasadena City Hall. This was from my last class of that 10-week class. So this was like 10 weeks of um, oil painting and it was fun. And I met a lot of cool friends from there who some today I still work with, which was awesome from that class. But we kept painting together. And to me, that's actually how I really learned art. What I was doing before was just like fun, imaginative stuff in my head, my interests. But then the other side of it is, kind of my technical skill. And I just decided that I was going to be a painter because, yeah, I hate drawing. And I say that all the time, and everyone knows that. And I always say I can't draw because I really can't. But I love painting. So after that class was over, I didn't want to use that easel anymore, and I hate oil paints because it's a really annoying setup. So we switched to gouache. And because, a lot of our heroes and art animation people do it, and everyone was talking about gouache painting. So this was my first gouache painting ever out in Silver Lake, and I didn't really know how to use it, and I didn't know how much water to use, but I did it anyways. And it's interesting looking, but I just kept going. And, over the course of like many years, honestly, I just slowly got better. Um, and I tried to do it once a week while I was busy and I stopped taking classes. I just forced myself to go outdoors, once a week at least to go paint. And slowly over the course of like a couple years, I would say like a year or two of like a pretty consistent painting, you just slowly just get better. Not because you're trying to do anything, it's just through observation and through practice. So this was one of the paintings that I thought I made a breakthrough in because it's one of my favorite locations out in Malibu, on Matador Beach. I painted it like last week actually, because it's a really special rock to me. But you can start seeing that like a lot of my colors are actually improving from like my, earlier work. Um, it I see a lot of myself today still in it, like a lot of these temperature shifts are still kind of in that realm. So again, looking back, oh, I still like this painting. And then I just kept going, took some classes about a gouache painting class, doing homework. This is stuff that you do in school, but still lives, practice, get a little better. But really it was that joy of like going outdoors and taking a walk. I love sunset. Like my colors, like everyone who knows me probably, knows I paint like sunset colors way too much because I just love that color palette and that time of day and just being out there. And I've gone out there a lot in person to just look at sunsets. So all that kind of instills into my brain. And when I have to draw on colors as an artist, it's really easy for me to kind of recall those colors and those feelings of walking through landscapes and what the temperature is and what the weather looks is like and the bugs in your face. So for me, that's the beauty of plein air painting. It gives you not just painting skills because you're painting with real paints, but there's a lot of experiences involved in it that help you, you know, capture, the feeling or the atmosphere. People always say like, oh, it feels like this place, but the colors are totally, not real, but it feels like it. And that's kind of something I think is, I don't want to say necessary to, again, every artist is different, but, to me, like the great color artists all kind of share those same experiences. Um, Watermelon, still lives under colored lights. I remember this was my first time painting under colored lights. and it didn't go well. It's really difficult. And then experimentation. This was one where I was just like, let's be impressionist. I was like inspired by like the impressionists, and I still am today, but like impressionists like Monet, most well known. And you have dabs of small paints. So I was like, yeah, why not? Again, no rules, no one telling me what to do. I can experiment freely with colors. And I remember I also used pure blue out of the tube, and I was like, oh, that's cool. You can just throw pure, I think that's phthalo blue, straight out of the tube and get away with it. Cool. And all of a sudden my paintings just got like way more saturated because I was realizing what I can get away with it. And all that is just through experimentation and practice. And then I kept going. Well, and then I put this in here because I guess one of my friends, I was still architect at this time, but one of my animation friends that I met in class, they just invited me to participate in like a little charity gallery out at the guild, um, animation guild here in Burbank. And I was like, okay, I'll submit a painting. So I took a photo off the freeway. And this was like one of the first times I painted from a photograph. And I was like, okay, let's just make a cool, you know, painting for this gallery show just for fun, see what happens. And yeah, so I was like, sunset, cool. Um, yeah, and then I remember someone who, yeah, and then someone actually bought it too. So this is actually my first painting sold. Um, yeah, and then I ended up like becoming friends with the person who bought it years after the fact, because he obviously works in animation too. And I was like, I remember that. I remember that painting. So it's really, really cool. And this one was also one of the first paintings I ever sold. City Hall. My friend um, owns it. So it's in her living room, which is always fun when I visit. But this was a pretty cool one for me. And then, yeah, same with this one. And this one was one of the first big paintings I've ever done. Well, it's not big, it's 8 by 10, which is small, but much bigger than like my little plein air studies. And I remember it took like 10 hours and I was like so careful. Again, this was for a gallery show that the Warrior Painters put on. And I met them because I wanted to keep painting. So I just painted with them and they threw on a cool gallery show. I think it was, I forgot what it was. I think it was like CTN actually, like the CTN road trip show or something. And then so I submitted this one. It was like my favorite painting. I was like, oh my God, I'm so proud of this. I can't believe I did like a full painting that looks like a actual painting. Um, and then and then yeah, it sold too to like a really amazing artist who I like really looked up to at the time. Um, and like I personally wanted to meet, and I was like, why the hell are you buying this and paying like I think I priced it at like 300 bucks or something, which is like quite a lot. But you know, so after this, I was like, okay, maybe I'm actually getting good at this painting thing, or like at least my paintings are actually worth something to someone. And slowly you know, I just kept doing it because I was like, these big architectural paintings are kind of cool. Um, again, City Hall, I was so proud of this one when I made it. I totally paint differently now and my colors are totally different, but I still like these paintings. I think they're still actually pretty solid paintings looking back. And this was like, I was still not working at this time. So this was, I don't know, at least like 8, 9 years ago. And then, well, and then we skip a lot of time because then I moved into the industry and I got in because again, the Warrior Painters, a lot of you probably know Angela Sung is kind of, she runs the Warrior Painters and I just started painting with them. And she saw my work and was like, hey, you can paint. Would you like to paint for this show that I'm working on? And I'm like, sure. And that's basically how I got into animation. So really, I never really made a background painting portfolio. My portfolio was just gouache paintings or painting with someone. And I was just lucky to have met Angela. And I ended up working on Kipo, which was my first show at DreamWorks 6, 7 years ago. And then this painting is just something that was like 2 years ago. I jumped forward a lot of time just to show the difference between like, earlier and now. Hopefully I've improved. I think my colors have definitely evolved a lot, and that became what I was most interested about. And at that time, I think I discovered that my interest in art wasn't drawing. It wasn't really like making mechs or like even like architecture in a way. It was painting like landscapes and architecture. And within that realm, it was color and light. Color and light is absolutely my obsession with art within art and what I now teach. Um, and everything I do towards art, of course I like dabble in other things like figure drawing or sketching, and we all have to like improve on our weaknesses. But I do know that color and light is where I stand as an artist, or my contribution, especially professionally in art. All my heroes, I think, well, I have a bunch of different inspirations and heroes growing up as an artist, but when I was plein air painting, obviously my favorites were, you know, people like Nathan Fowkes or Mike Hernandez, Dice Tsushumi, amazing colorists because they were, the best colorists in animation. And all of them traditionally paint and do plein air and love plein air. And I just basically was like, okay, I'm gonna do the same thing. And it felt really reasonable and it really felt achievable too. Um, because there was just, you just kind of felt it and you knew it. You knew like, I just knew like I was gonna just paint because I had the most fun doing it. It wasn't, making sci-fi buildings. And I really don't do that anymore. But looking back at my old like work before painting, like, yeah, maybe I should revisit it. All right, so what time is it? 7:37. Okay, so yeah, and this is this work, really recent work from my class that I've done, and what I inspire students to do. I still go out and paint as much as I can. And I'm mostly showing you all traditional work because to me, this is how I learned art. There's still a lot of aspects of art that I like really suck at, and I'm still trying to improve. But everything I do, especially for work, especially the color stuff for work that I do, all the color keys that I get to do for work, I'm mostly known for that. And usually like in my assignments are all over the place and I do a little bit of everything, but I do know that when, when the studio brings me onto shows, they want me for my color. And that's awesome because that was similar to, Nathan and, Nathan Fowkes and Mike Hernandez and Dice, of course, the most amazing colorists in animation. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of doing the same now. So, that really is kind of, at least to now, the bulk of my journey. And, I want to do a lot more stuff. I want to do personal work and I have all these big ambitions, but at least, I made it this far. Um, and then I just have some more work to show. This was like digital plein air after I painted traditionally and I stopped digital painting. And then I went back like a year later after I stopped digital painting. And then I realized how much my work changed because of how traditional painting influenced me. And then this stuff that I was doing was, looking back, I mean, it's pretty solid. I don't know. But I started finding a workflow that works for me. And it's very, very much influenced by like the way I traditionally paint. I paint like traditional digitally in a way. And then yeah, there's just more stuff that I want to do. This was something I never finished and I'm still working on some project about dreams. And that's why everything I paint is dreamy nowadays because that's what I'm interested in. I've been painting cats. That was a kind of, and dogs. That was a little obsession of mine during lockdown. Some imaginative landscapes. Um, personal work can go anywhere. And all of them, the thing with all of them is they're all kind of similar because everything I've done kind of has coalesced into this as an artist, but they're all a little different too, and just experimenting. Again, part of that project I never finished. And still, digital plein airs, or this wasn't plein air, but places and familiar places. I still love just capturing the landscapes around me, both urban, interior architecture, exterior architecture, landscapes, places. That's still what interests me the most. And then recently I've been playing a lot more, just evolving my work. There's a lot of nuance in this now that I, you know, can talk about, but mostly it's just experimentation and trying to find a different feel, trying to capture a feeling, making my work more interesting, making it stand out more, playing with colors, my favorite thing, but also edges and texture and watercolory stuff. Uh, and this is kind of, yeah, this is pretty recent. So this is like the stuff that I've really recent that it was on a poster. The last piece I did that I actually liked. And it's a lot of the same things, a lot of the same architecture that I painted a long time ago, like 7, 8 years ago, except I have a whole nother layer of interpretation and color design and just art things, that I find interesting, and I just try it out and see where it goes. And the truth is, in terms of this stuff, I am still definitely on my journey and searching for like the way I like to work, the way my own personal style, you can say. Um, but the common thread was, I think, all these paintings, including the stuff I did when I was like a little kid that I showed, have similarities. And to me, that just speaks about like who I am, what my interests are, what I love. Um, and then, yeah, and then food was is like the new thing that I started painting, because food is incredibly pretty. And I still keep that, I still do that like dreamy stuff, because that's just what I'm searching for right now. So, colors, dreamy stuff. And I have no idea where this will go. I wish I had more time in a day and more energy to keep exploring, but real work calls. Um, I know I didn't talk that much about my professional career, but I think all the work I've done professionally is like really well documented. It's all on my Instagram, my portfolio. It's in like the art of books. Um, it can be a whole nother talk, to be honest. But for me, I think the most important thing is, to leave with you all, is to kind of find what you love and then just go towards that. It answers all your questions about like what you want to do with an art, because you'll end up finding something that calls to you a little more than everything else. And it's not like you can't explore everything else. Of course I try and draw. Of course I hate figure drawing, but I still do it. But whatever you end up loving, you'll end up doing the most, and it will probably be fun. And then you just go down that road of exploring, because every aspect of art has a whole different tunnel and rabbit hole that you can dive under. There's a whole, there's aspects of art outside of animation that are interesting. So much more. And the cool thing about working in animation with like a bunch of different artists is that everyone has this different journey and different artistic influence. And a lot of times, when people come from the same schools, it's like we talk about the same artist. And, that's all great, because, the great artists are great. But then a lot of times the most interesting people, the artists that I truly love, like they come from like the most randomest place with the most randomest stuff. They don't give a shit what anyone thinks about their art, and they just do it. And they keep doing it because they love it, and they end up finding something pretty spectacular. And for me, I'm still searching for that. And I think, for all of you, that's probably the same way. You're probably here because we all have a common thread of interest in art, but, you know, we're all here just to search. So, we're all part of this journey that kind of coalesces and winds and weaves and intersects with other artists, and we end up becoming friends and share our passion, and then we just keep going because it's fun. Cool. 7:45,
Yeah.
44. You have
Okay.
15 minutes for a Q&A, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
15.
And actually, before I jump into that, just to get you guys a little more inspired, hopefully. Um, oops, not this. I'll just, I can like save this out and give it to you, but for me, my entire talk was about how plein air changed my life and landscape painting and my love for this. So for anyone who's interested in color and light and outdoors and nature and stuff, definitely try and pick it up. For me, it was just a fun hobby. It can just be a hobby, but you might end up falling in love with it. And if you're interested in color, I think this is the best way to go about it. So, I can share this, but just my supplies, super simple. You can get started. If you scared of starting, I teach a class that the whole goal is just to get people to go paint and to practice and to go through that same journey that I went to. So if you're interested in that, take a class, find other friends to do it with, and it's incredibly fulfilling, at least for me. If you hate painting and you like drawing and characters and stuff, ignore all of this and go figure draw. But we all have our own interests and own journeys to go through.
Ooh,
Yeah.
did you
All
have
right, cool.
share? Oh, did you have any more slides to share?
No, that's it,
Okay,
I think. Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, any questions will be cool. We have 15 or 14 minutes left, so
Yeah,
perfect timing. And
perfect.
then I'll just play a video in the back while I answer questions. This was that painting from the Arboretum that I did. This was for a demo, so I recorded it and it's 13 minutes long, so perfect. We'll just play it so you can kind of watch my process while it goes.
Cool. Thanks, Wade, for the awesome presentation. So cool to see all your artwork. Grace has a question. Grace asked, out of curiosity, how would you say digital painting compares to traditional painting? Do you think digital painting is able to do what traditional painting does?
Hmm. Well, I definitely say like the obvious things is like digital is much easier in a way than traditional, obviously because of like layers and technology and Control Z and all that stuff. But I do think like they're really the same thing in the end because you have to understand art to be able to do it. It's just different mediums. It's just traditional painting gives you a lot more restrictions. But at the same time, I think you can experiment with fun things in traditional painting that's kind of difficult to represent digitally, although I think digital technology is good enough to just, there's people who digital paint and it looks like traditional. There's people who spend the time doing that because that's their interest, trying to replicate those technology and those textures into like Photoshop technology or so just two different mediums really. Whatever works better for you is just something you do. I do think the main thing about traditional painting is you mix with real paints and you learn how primaries work together like blue, yellow, and red. You can paint anything with. I only use three colors, by the way. I use blue, a yellow, a red, and white for every single painting I do, and I can get a full range of color just with those. So you learn about mixing, and that's something you don't learn in Photoshop because in Photoshop you like literally I drop and you click on the color you want, and because you learn about mixing, you learn to think about color in a certain way which to me is helps my color a lot. Not necessary because there's amazing painters, colorists who do everything digitally, but I think that's the main advantage. It's hard, but it helps. So if you're interested in color, again, I still suggest everyone digitally paint. I mean, traditionally paint, but also paint from life. Actually, that's the big one is paint from what you see with your eyes and not photographs.
Wonderful insight. Thanks, Wade. Asia asked, what kind of advice would you give to fresh art grads who just graduated but have no luck finding internships or jobs?
Mm. Yeah, so the industry changes every once in a while, and right now it's not the greatest time for like animation, you know, and that's just kind of how things are. But the best advice for people who can't find a job is, unfortunately, you can't make money, but if you can still find a way to live, you have all the free time in the world to do art, um, and to search and to experiment. Because once you start working, the thing that me and all my coworkers have in common is that all we want to do is do personal work, and we have no time because we come home from work super tired and drained because we spent all our mental capacity on work, and we don't have time to be really creative, um, you know, at home at night. So, which is why I love plein air painting, because this is like a separate activity. I just copy what I see, and it's doesn't take that much brain power for me anymore. But then like the truly creative experimental work and trying things, the stuff you do in for work. Yeah, I don't do much anymore, to be honest, my personal stuff. So if you graduated from college, work on that personal project that you've always want to do, because once you start working for real, you're going to be working on someone else's project, and you have to listen to what they want to do, and it might not be what you want to do. And doing that will help you improve. It'll help you create portfolio pieces, and eventually, just by doing that, you'll probably get better, and you'll probably end up with a job eventually, if you just keep chasing it. So yeah, that's my best advice. Just go make art.
Cool. Thanks, Wayne. Asia said thank you too. Next question we have from Christy. How do you define visual development compared to concept art in the context of animation? Are they the same thing?
Yeah, I would say they're basically the same thing. Visual development is just like the term we use for animation for some reason, and concept art is more like video games, live action, I think. But yeah, they're the same thing. It's basically creating art to develop the look of a world or a IP or something. So same thing.
Cool. And then I believe Hannah had a question. I think she wanted to ask you personally. So you can go ahead and
Oh, yeah. Hi, Wayne. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really insightful to see like your journey and how much you grew, and like your seventh grade work was actually so good as a seventh grader. But my question is actually about your first industry experience, because it kind of seemed like you weren't really looking for a job and like it just kind of popped up. So I was
Mm,
wondering what that transition was like from like just doing your plein airs for fun to like doing industry work.
yeah. So I mean, in terms of work, I was doing architecture at the time, so it was pretty different. But in terms of work, I was like, I just get to paint all day. Great, this is awesome. Um, so there wasn't like, it was a pretty natural transition for me, because I think I found something that I actually wanted to do. So it was fun and it was great. I met a lot of cool people on my first show. And then in terms of like my whole like not looking, and things just happen thing, that's just my own weird philosophy of how I live life. I kind of just like patient and just keep doing my own thing, and then eventually opportunities will come, and then you like go chase them. I think, like, to be honest, for everyone looking for a job, like, you have to like, you should do your due diligence and like apply for jobs, and go to studio networking things. Like all that stuff isn't necessarily bad, but a lot of times like there's so many people and so much competition out there that I very few people make it through, those type of things. And as unfortunate as that sounds, I feel like, for me, I like don't really network and do all that stuff. I'm just an artist. And I've gotten by without it because I'm kind of lucky, and DreamWorks is like keeping me around. But so like I'm not the greatest in terms of job searching, but for me, because I just felt like working on my art is just more important than actually it's okay. Everyone always says like it's about who you know, and I don't disagree with that, but I think the more you truly work on your art, like the more you'll end up standing out, and then people will start to notice you. And that's at least what happens to me. So, I would say focus on the art, um, and then the job hunt stuff will just kind of happen, I think. But
Oh,
yeah,
thank you so
yeah,
much.
I don't know. It's not the greatest advice. Don't be like me. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Ooh, we have a question from Mikey. I think he wants to hear about your process. He asked, how do you decide the colors of the first like layers slash under.
Hmm.
I saw you use yellow for the sky and some pinks here and there.
Yeah. For traditional paintings, it's just something that honestly, I think I'm the only person that does it. A lot of plein air landscape painters love toning the canvas in traditional painting just to have something underneath you have value, so it's not white. And a lot of plein air traditional painters, like fine artists, tone it with like yellow ochre or like a warm yellow because it's really great for like sunlight to like peek through, and they leave a little bit of it, and it's kind of cool. Um, I just took that idea and just made it my own. So I kind of have a color coded system that I change depending on what I'm painting. So there's not really like a really good reason. The best reason actually I'll go back on this. The best reason I have for it is it helps me see the painting before I start laying down like the actual colors. It helps me see like the value structure in a way. So I still have the yellow for the sky because it's like a cool sun coming through. And then the pink is just like a darker value for me. And then the blue is just, again, I only use yellow, red, and blue. Like these are my three colors. So I don't have much to go with. And then the blue is like the cooler, darker shadows. At least for this painting. And these are just the rules I have in my head. And it helps me just kind of organize before I actually start laying down thicker paint on top. So yeah, sometimes it's like I don't do thumbnails and I don't do like a little like sketch with like my values that they make you do in school. I just paint. And this is basically my thumbnail without thumbnailing. And I just paint on top. Um, so it's just something I developed, but mostly it's just the underpainting. The color is just something that just helps with my shapes. And I redesign it as I paint. So these are like not final. It's really easy to cover it up. So I just paint on top and then make nicer shapes on top. Hope that makes sense.
That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thanks. Are there any other questions? If you would like to unmute and personally ask Wayne, you can feel free to do that. Or you can drop them in the chat and I can totally ask them for you too. But otherwise, we can just continue watching Wayne's demo.
Cool. There's like 4 minutes left.
Wayne,
Hi.
hi. You said that you teach a class. So where could we find that?
So my most recent class was at the Warrior Art Camp. And it's probably what I'll teach my next class too. I just jump around. And I usually only teach like once a year, and I probably won't teach again until next year because I'm doing Lightbox this year. And I just want to focus on my free time, like making stuff for that, which is stressing me out. So yeah, maybe in like November or like early next year will probably be when I teach next, but it'll most likely be with the Warrior Art Camp.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you.
Cool.
If you don't mind me asking, have you ever like, I guess like made a painting and then you felt like, oh, this is just like bad. And then like, how did you, I guess like
No,
deal with that? Like, do you try to like rework it or no, never, that's fair.
no, yeah, all the time. Like 90% of the paintings you do, especially plein air painting. And I think plein air painting, because you're literally going somewhere, you sit down and you have like an hour to paint it, under whatever circumstance you're in. Like, yeah, they all come out like crap, and you kind of that really helps you deal with it. I don't really go back and fix things unless it's like professional work because I have to. I never go back. I just repaint it again. I just go back the next day to the same place and then try it again. And you'll probably get a little better and a little better, and eventually you'll get it. So really, I think as an artist, you just have to accept the fact that half the work or more that you do, you're probably not going to like. Every painting is a struggle within yourself and in your brain. Like very few paintings come easy. Um, and honestly, I don't think it should, because if it comes easy, then that means you're doing something you've done like a million times before. And if it's for work, then cool. You can get by with an easy week. But personal work and like you always try to push yourself. And that means if you're pushing yourself, you're definitely probably struggling. So it's okay to struggle. Enjoy the process.
Thank you. Uh,
How long did this painting take?
This one was, so I recorded it, so I was really focused. Probably less than like 2 hours, like an hour and a half. Yeah, because I recorded, I have like the non-sped up version, and then this is like, 4x or 8x. But yeah, I would say about 2 hours. Now I'm a very fast painter now when it comes to traditional, just because I've done it so much. That big like
Wow.
that big painting that I showed you. What was it, Griffith Observatory? That was my first big painting, and it took like 10 hours. This is like around the same size, and I'm just like a lot faster, but I'm also a lot looser. And I don't have to think that much before anymore because I have done this painting a lot. And this is like at the LA Arboretum. Um, I have painted this before in person too. So doing this at home from a photograph was like much easier because I can recall the colors, I can recall the feeling, and I've done it before, smaller. So it's just, acclimating yourself. And over time, you just get faster. Things just get easier, but still hard at the same time. Nothing comes easy.
Okay. It's really cool. It's really cool.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. That puts us right around 8. I think that'll be the last question. Again, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. Thank you so much, Wayne, for joining us, for giving us your time, sharing your awesome knowledge. I linked a couple things in the chat. So I linked Warrior Art Camp, which is where Wayne said he will usually be teaching. I linked Wayne's Instagram if you're not already following him. I also put in a link for the Asians in Animation Discord, which is where the recording will go up. It should be going up within the next month or so. It'll be under the announcements channel. But yeah, thank you so much for coming, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful evening, day, wherever you
Cool.
are.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was fun.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.